Before we get into the photo editing, there's some really important points I want to touch on. The first is that we can change our ASIR. Rather than being a hotspot, we can make it so that it can connect to our home Wi-Fi network. Therefore, we can reach it from a much larger distance with our smartphone. And this is what I did for my most recent shooting session, and it really worked out a lot better. So if you want to do this, start up your ASIR Pro, go to the Wi-Fi settings, and then you need to change the hotspot band to 2.4G. From there, you can go to the Wi-Fi station mode, turn it on with that little green switch, then connect to your home Wi-Fi network. Once you've input the password for the network, it should connect. And then at that point, you can actually control your ASIR Pro through your home's Wi-Fi network on your smartphone. You no longer have to connect to the ASIR's Wi-Fi network. So you can see right now I'm using the app, but I'm connected to the home network, not the ASIR's hotspot network. And this really helps to solve a lot of the problems I was having where if I was 15 feet away, it would lose connection to the ASIR. Now I can reach it from wherever my home Wi-Fi network reaches. There's also a wired internet option for those of you who like to have a wired connection, but for me, running a USB cable, or rather an Ethernet cable, all the way from my router to my ASIR is just not going to work. So for me, the Wi-Fi station mode works great. Another thing I want to mention is that the ASIR Pro does come with a 64 gigabyte flash drive that you can plug into the ASIR Pro at any time. So what I want to show you now is that if we go up to that little USB icon at the top, if you plugged in your little USB stick, it will automatically start saving the images to that device. Then from that point, you're not saving anything to the internal SD card, which is probably a little bit safer. And of course, the 64 gigabyte flash drive has a lot more space than the internal one. You can even go to the image management right there, open that up, and see all the footage you've taken. And by default, it's going to generate some little small JPEG files so you can at least get a preview. But now we know that everything is being saved to that flash drive. Then we can always plug that into our computer and have a much faster transfer. And now that we've talked about that, and we've also captured our images, we need to get those photos off the ASIR Pro and onto our computer. The first thing you can do is go up to the top of your address bar, type in //ASIR. Then you'll be able to see your images right here. The images here, that's from the internal SD card. If you go back the U disk, that will be your flash drive if you plug it into the ASIR Pro. You see a SanDisk right there. Then we can go into the Horsehead Nebula folder, in this case, the auto run. And from there, we'll see all the photos I took last night. We got our bias, darks, lights. And then inside of that light folder, we see all our images and then the very small JPEG previews, which really aren't any use to us right here. But anyway, normally what I do is I just grab it by the object I photographed, copy that, and then paste that onto my computer. And I want to be clear here, the only way to do this is if you're connected via Wi-Fi station mode and the ASIR Pro is turned on, which I showed you at the start of the video. That will allow you to communicate with the ASIR Pro through your home Wi-Fi network. However, this method isn't perfect, mainly because you're transferring over the wireless connection, so it's going to go very slowly. And for that reason, I really don't recommend it because there's much better ways to do this. But if you just want a simple way to do it through the Wi-Fi and you don't mind if it takes an hour to transfer all your photos, you can do that. The other way, of course, if you didn't set up the Wi-Fi station mode on the ASIR Pro, you can connect to the ASIR Pro's Wi-Fi network with your laptop. Then once you're connected to the ASIR Pro's Wi-Fi network, you can do the same thing I just showed you. So we would connect to the Wi-Fi network right here. We'd go back up to our top toolbar there, type in //ASIR Pro, and do the same technique. However, it's going to be just as slow as we're doing it right now. So there's really no reason to do it this way either. You're better off setting your ASIR Pro to the home station Wi-Fi network and doing it that route. Now, personally, my recommended way to do this is just to take the flash drive out of your ASIR Pro, plug it into your laptop, and then copy the images from there. That's going to be at least 10 times faster, if not more, maybe 100 times faster. So if you do that, you can just copy them right to your computer, and then this should complete within 20-30 seconds, and we're ready to go. You can see it's over way faster than it was before. Anyway, however you want to do it, once you have the photos saved to your laptop, then of course we can start the editing. Now that we finally captured our first images with a dedicated Astro camera, we need to take the raw photos that look something like this and turn that into a final image like this. And believe it or not, the workflow is actually fairly simple. And since this is our very first post-processing video, I'm going to really make sure we keep it very basic and still allow you to get a great shot. First, let's head over to our folder structure here. You can see I created a folder called Orion. And then from there, I broke up my images into different folders. I've got my bias frames, I've got my dark frames, and then I've got, most importantly, my light frames. And the great thing is the ASIR Pro clearly labeled everything so we don't get confused. In this case, I took a light frame of Orion, 30 seconds long, with the blue filter. And then we have about 20 of those shots. Then we swap over to the green filter, the L filter, and then the red filter. So just make sure you have things organized so you don't get confused. Next, we're going to go over to DeepSkyStacker. This is a free download if you're on Windows. If you're on a Mac, you can't get this application, so you'll need to find an alternative, and I'll probably cover that in a future tutorial here in the course. But for DeepSkyStacker, the first thing you want to do is go up to Open Picture Files in red. Then we need to navigate, of course, to our folder structure here. And what I'm going to do is just start off with the blue filter images. So I'm going to click on the first blue filter, hold down the Shift key, and then click on the last blue filter image. And again, we've got 20 here. Then I'll hit Open. Now, if you want to see your photo, you can click on any one of these. It's going to bring up a preview. And then up top here, you have like a little gamma slider. You can move the center point over to the left. That will at least kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at here. And this won't have any effect on the actual image. It's just a preview. So feel free to mess with this as much as you want. But that's kind of our photo with a blue filter. Now what I need to do is add in my darks, flats, and bias if you took them. First, we have dark files up top here. And in this case, I went to my darks folder. I'm going to select all of them right here. Then I'll hit Open. Next, I'm going to go down to the offset or bias frames and select all 100 of my bias images. If you had flat frames, you can also add those in right here, but in my case, I don't really need them because there's no vignette and my sensor doesn't have any dust on it yet, so there's no point in using flats right now. Then, once you've added in all of your different image types, we're going to hit Check All over on the left. That way, all of these different images have a little check mark. Once you've hit Check All, you can go to Register Checked Pictures in red. From here, it's going to give you a nice little window. There's a great option here to select the best percentage of pictures and stack them. In other words, if you know a few of your photos might have been blurry, you can put in the best 80 or 90%, and DeepSkyStacker will throw out any bad photos up to a certain point. On the other hand, if you know that every single photo you took was perfectly sharp, you can put this to 100%. It's up to you. I usually go 80 or 90 just in case there was something I missed, it'll throw it out. Then we'll go to the Advanced tab, and we need to move this star detection threshold slider and find the amount of stars. Very simply, the default is 10%, and I'm going to hit Compute the number of detected stars. It's now going to run through and analyze this image, and it found about 102 stars. If I just glance at the photo, it looks like there's about 100, so that sounds fine to me. If it finds hundreds and hundreds and thousands of stars, or it finds 0, then you need to move the slider around until you get, again, just a ballpark estimate of how many stars are in the image. If you move the slider to the right, it's going to find less stars. And if you go down below 10%, it's going to find more stars. But in this case, for my dedicated Astro camera, 10% works fine. Once you've found the appropriate number of stars here, we're going to click on Recommended Settings. And then we have all the recommended settings that the application recommends. All you really have to do is click on the blue hyperlink and it will automatically apply that. Or if it's in green, it's already been applied. In my case, I really don't have to do anything, so I'm just going to hit OK. Finally, we can click on Stacking Parameters. You really shouldn't have to touch anything in here unless you really want to get more advanced. The default settings should work fine in almost every case. And you can always pause the video and see what I have if you are confused. But like I said, I don't even really touch anything in here, and I just let it run. We'll get more advanced though in the future. This is just our very first video on processing. But that's all we have to do there. We'll hit OK. We'll hit OK again. This is our last screen here. This is really our final attempt to make sure that we have everything we need. And you'll notice there's no error messages except that I don't have any flat frames. So if you see any red text, make sure you read it and see if you can find out what's going wrong. Another nice thing is that it tells you your total exposure time. In this case, I only captured 10 minutes with each filter, which is really not a lot of time at all. And as we'll see, that's going to cause me some problems when we get into the post-processing, but we'll work around it. Anyway, provided everything looks good here, we're going to hit OK, and then it's going to start our processing. This will take anywhere from 2 or 3 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your computer, how many photos you took, and also how many darks and bias frames you included as well. And that was actually really fast. I'm used to using a DSLR, and DeepSkyStacker takes a long time to get through it. But it seems like with the dedicated Astro cameras, it only takes a minute or two, and then we're done. Once you get to this screen, DeepSkyStacker is going to generate an autosave.tiff. However, that's going to be like a 32-bit file. You really don't want to work with that because it's just going to cause you more headaches. Once you're at this screen, all you have to do is come to the left where it says Save Picture to File. From here, navigate to your directory and create a new folder called TIFFs if you haven't done so already. Then in here, we're going to name this based on the filter we used. In this case, we're using the blue filter, so I'm going to put blue. Make sure you have embed adjustments, but do not apply them. No compression, and then hit save. And now we've finally saved our very first image stack. Once you've saved your first image, we now need to do that with all the rest. And the way you can do that is go back to the register and stacking button at the very top of the screen on the left. And now we're back to our starting interface. From here, I'm actually going to clear the list and then hit no, I don't want to save any changes. And now I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to go to Open Picture Files. Then I'm going to go down to the green filter, select all 20 photos, open them. Now I'm going to add in the dark frames again. However, you might have a master dark right now, and you can probably use that, and it should speed up the processing time quite a bit. However, since the processing time is so fast, I have no problem just selecting all the dark frames again manually and adding them into it. Same thing with the bias, you can select them all individually, or you should be able to just take the master offset, and that should work fine too. Again, we'll get more into that in an upcoming video. Just keeping it simple today. Once you've added in all your photos, we'll hit check all again. Then when we go to our register checked pictures, everything should already be set properly, including the recommended settings. So all you really have to do is hit OK and hit OK. Once we get to the end of this process, we'll be in the stage like this, and then we'll go to Save Picture to File, and this time we'll name this one Green. And we're going to keep doing that until we've saved all our different color filters, and then we can finally go over to Photoshop. Alright, so I've saved my L, R, G, and B stacks here in DeepSkyStacker. I can close out of it finally. Now we're going to navigate to our TIFFs folder and find our various TIFFs. Then all we have to do is either right-click and open with Adobe Photoshop, or you can go into Photoshop and open it however you want to do it. For me, I've got it set up where I can just double-click and it'll immediately load it up here in the app. And just go ahead and get all 3 or 4 filters that you might have. If you don't have a Luminance, that's okay. It's not really required, but it does help. At this point, we now see our different stacks all up top here in our tabs. And there's no right or wrong way to do this necessarily. So since I'm on red, we're just going to stick with this image for right now. What I want you to do is go up to Image, Mode, and then put this from grayscale to RGB color. When you switch it to RGB color right here, you can now go to the Channels tab and you'll see red, green, and blue. Very simply, all we're going to do now is copy the other filters into these channels, and then we'll immediately have a color photo. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to my green filter right here. I'm going to hit Control or Command A to select everything, Control or Command C to copy it. Then we'll go back to the red tab, go to the green color channel, and then we're going to paste that data in with Control or Command V. Next, we're going to go to the blue image. We'll hit Control or Command A, Control or Command C, go back to the red. Then we'll click on the blue color channel right here. and paste that in with Control or Command V. Now, if we click the little eyeball next to RGB and zoom in, you can see we have a full color image. However, there are some problems. And this is fairly typical. The stars are not lined up properly on all three of our color channels, so we're gonna have to do things manually. Very simply, just click on the little move tool up here in the very top left. Then what I want you to do is click on the blue filter, or rather the blue color channel. From here, just use the arrow keys and you'll see that the blue stars are moving around. We want to line them up as close as we can with all the others. And I think right there is as close as I'm going to get. Then I'll click on the green color channel and do the same thing. I'll just use my arrow keys and move those around until they appear to line up as closely as possible. Finally, we'll go to the red color channel, move that up and down until it's right in the center. And there we go. We've now aligned the color channels. There's a little bit of fringing, but that's okay for right now. We're just doing the basics. If we go back to our layers now and zoom out, there's our color image. It really doesn't look like much of anything, right? That's because my gain was set to 0 and the raw photos were very, very dark. But we can still salvage the photo, thankfully, just using a couple adjustment layers that I'm going to show you next. First, we need to do what's called a histogram stretch. And if you go to your levels adjustment, that's how we're going to do this. If you don't have an adjustments tab here, go up to Window and then choose Adjustments. Now that you have this window, we're going to click on the levels icon right here. Then we need to move the midpoint here pretty far to the left. So I'm just going to click on it and drag it over to the left. And you can see we're actually able to see part of the Orion Nebula now. But we're still not even close. So I'm going to go back to my Adjustments tab and then add in another Levels adjustment. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move the midpoint over to the left until I can see more of the nebula. For whatever reason, Photoshop has this really annoying bug where when we're adding adjustment layers like this, it makes it very pixelated. Thankfully, it's not messing with the photo, it's just the interface looks whacked out. All you have to do to fix it is zoom in a little bit, and at some point it will auto-correct. So I don't know why they do that. Hopefully they'll fix that in some future update, but that's probably what you'll encounter. All you have to do is zoom in, and then we can continue on. Next, we'll go back to our adjustments and add another levels adjustment. Hopefully you don't have to do too many of these. I do because my photos are really underexposed. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move the midpoint over to the left, and now we can finally see the Orion Nebula. Another thing you can try, if everything is really pixelated, I want you to hit Control, Shift, Alt, and E, or Command, Shift, Option, E. If you did all those keys correctly at the same time, it's going to create a new layer with all of these adjustments combined into one. That will also fix the glitch of the pixelated screen. Another benefit of this is if we go back to our adjustments and add a levels adjustment, you can now actually see your histogram spike much more clearly. Without it, it's all broken up and you can't really even see anything. So Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E if you're on a Mac, it's a very useful tool that you'll need to remember. So for this last levels adjustment, I'm going to move the black point over to the right near the start of the peak, and then the left, or rather the midpoint, a little further to the left. And there we go. There is the Orion Nebula. And if I zoom in, you're going to notice that there's a lot of color noise especially, and just a lot of grain, because I only captured 10 minutes with each filter, and that's hardly any time at all. However, I do still have this luminance layer that we haven't touched yet, and that's going to help us to reduce some of that grain. So what I did is I clicked on my luminance layer here, or rather the TIFF file, and what I want to do now is that same process. I'm going to go to my adjustments, I'm going to add a levels adjustment, move it over to the left, I'm going to go back, add another levels adjustment, move it over to the left, and then I can zoom in to make sure everything looks good. And then maybe I'll add one more levels adjustment layer, hit Control Shift Alt E, that way I can actually see the spike. There we go. Right about there I think looks good. Once you've stretched your luminance image here, we can actually utilize this data. So once you've added in all the levels adjustments that you need to get a stretched photo, I'm going to right click and then merge or flatten the image, however you want to do it. That way there's just this one layer. Then I'll hit Control or Command A, Control or Command C. We've copied all the data. We'll go back to the red TIFF. Then I'm going to create a new layer down here at the very bottom. There's a little plus button. This create a new layer. I'm going to double click on it and name it Luminance. Finally, I'm going to hit Control or Command V to paste that data in. Now that we've added the luminance data on the top of all of our other layers, we need to change the blending mode here. That way it works properly. So what you want to do is click where it says normal and put this to luminosity. When you do that, you should now have a color photo with a lot less noise actually, and maybe even some more detail. So if I zoom in here, this is without the luminance data and after. You can see it's noticeably cleaner when we add in that luminance data because ultimately it's more light added into the photo. And if we look around here and do it before and after, one thing you might be noticing though is that the layers don't actually line up properly. Just like before, we need to make sure that the luminance layer is aligned with our RG and B layers. So what I want you to do is change the blending mode now from luminosity to difference. Once you're on difference, you need to click on the layer again or hit the escape key, most likely, because you can see here it's still highlighted. So hit the escape key, it's no longer highlighted here. Now we should be able to use the arrow keys and move the image around. And you can see that luminance data there is on top and I'm moving. I want to line it up just like that. I think that's about as good as I can get right there. Once you've lined up the data properly, we'll click where it says difference and put that back to luminosity. And there we go. We've now added in our luminance data and aligned it properly, and the image is noticeably cleaner now with that extra information. Finally, I can zoom back out, and there we go. We're not quite done yet, but we've come a long way in just a few layers. We started off here, and now we're here. That's pretty impressive. Next, what I want to do is add a curves adjustment layer. Once I click on my curves, then I'm going to click on the hand tool. From here, I can find an area that I want to be a little bit brighter, maybe right here somewhere. Then I'll click and drag my mouse upwards. What I actually did is I just moved this point here on the curve, but I actually did it by clicking on the image itself. Once you've made part of the photo brighter, we want to make the outlying sky a little bit darker. So I can zoom into a dark area. Then I'm going to click and drag down. And there we go. You've just added some nice contrast. However, it's very easy to blow out your stars and even the core there. So you really want to be careful if you're going to do this. You could even try lowering the opacity of the layer right here. And you can maybe do 10 or 20% of that. So there's a little bit of contrast, but not too much. In my case, I think that looks good right there. Then we need to fix the color cast because right now there's kind of a reddish color cast. The simplest way to fix that is to add another curves layer. Then click on the black point eyedropper. It's going to be the top one of the three. Once you have the black point eyedropper, all you have to do is click somewhere in the photo that should be completely black. And we've got a lot of choices, so I'm just going to click right over here. And if that doesn't really look that great, I'll click somewhere else. I'm just going to keep clicking until I get the colors looking exactly the way I want. I think right about there looks good. So there's our before and after. If you don't like how it made the image very dark though, you can always change the blending mode where it says normal and then go all the way down to color. And this is one of my best tips for you. So again, we took the black point dropper, clicked on a spot in the photo, then we changed the blending mode here from normal to color. That way it's only affecting the colors in the image, not the brightness. And that's a very simple way to fix any weird color cast in your photo. And we're almost to my reference image right here. I mean, we don't have much more to do to get to that stage. So the last thing I want to show you in today's workflow, what you're going to do is hit Control-Shift-Alt-E or Command-Shift-Option-E if you're on a Mac. Then go up to Filter and choose Camera Raw Filter. Now we're going to zoom in all the way, right about here. And you can see I've got a lot of color noise. That's mainly because I didn't capture enough light. And if I were to take longer exposures and overall more exposure time, this wouldn't be as much of an issue. But there is kind of a workaround here in Camera Raw. If you go to the little triangles tab for detail right here, we have a color slider. And all you have to do is move the color slider up to maybe 15 or 20, maybe even 25, and that should kill all that ugly color noise that was ruining the photo. You can also move the luminance slider up here to maybe 10 to 20, and that will also smooth out some of the grain that might be in your image. And there we go, I think that looks pretty good. And then I'll just hit OK. Now if I zoom in and do it before and after, you can see the image is noticeably cleaner with that one small adjustment. Finally, we need to go to the File and Save option. For the compression here, I usually put it on LZW or zip. You can do whatever you want here. I'm just gonna leave it on LZW for now, and then hit Save and hit OK. Once this is finished saving, we can always come back to this TIFF file at any time and go through our layers and delete them or adjust them as needed, or continue making changes to this master file. And I think one change I'm going to do right now is maybe add some more vibrance. So I'm going to go to the Adjustments tab again, go to the Vibrance tab, and then increase the saturation a little bit because it seemed kind of flat. And there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. So I can hit Control S or go to File Save again just to make sure I'm saving the TIFF. When you're finally ready to save this as a JPEG, we need to go up to Image, Mode, and put it to 8 bits per channel. But you only want to do this after you've verified you've saved the TIFF file, because if you were to accidentally save over with the 8 bits on your TIFF, you're going to lose a lot of color detail. But in this case, I'm ready to go. I went to Image, Mode, 8 bits per channel. Now I'm going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to save this as a JPEG. So I'm going to go back up to my JPEG folder, change it from TIFF here to JPEG. I'm saving this as an sRGB image, and then we'll name this Final YouTube. Hit Save, and there we go. We have a almost 3 meg file, and I'll hit OK. Well, that turned out pretty well, I think, all things considered. I mean, I only had 10 minutes of data. This was my very first night with the camera, and we still got a pretty cool shot out of it. And hopefully this process makes a little bit more sense now. The big thing that we did, just to recap our most important points today, we started off in DeepSkyStacker. We loaded in our various colored filters one at a time. Then we loaded in the bias frames and the dark frames and maybe even the flat frames. We processed all that. Then we went back, we cleared everything. Then we put in our green filter, then the L filter, and then the red filter. Once we had all of our different stacks completed, we came in here into Photoshop. Then what we did is we got our blue, green, and red images. We changed any one of those from image, mode, grayscale to RGB. Once we had an image in RGB color, then we could go to the channels tab here, and we had red, green, and blue color channels. All we had to do at that point was get the corresponding data, either red and blue in this case, paste it in on the corresponding color channel. Then we had a color image. From there, we did a whole bunch of these levels adjustment layers to get more of the Orion Nebula visible. Once we had a fairly nice looking image, we went over the Luminance layer, did the same thing. We added a bunch of levels. We copied that, then we pasted that on top right here, and that really ultimately just cleaned up the image quite a bit. Then finally we did a few curves and a color noise reduction. And that's really all there is to it. Now if you're completely overwhelmed from this video, you'll just want to practice a lot, because you really got to get familiar with Photoshop if you want to take things to the next level. I've also got some full courses over on my website, which there's like 15 plus hours of tutorials on there. And if you have a DSLR especially, that's a great way to learn more about Photoshop. I really take you through from the complete basics to some of the most advanced techniques you're going to find. But if you want to stay tuned here on YouTube, I'm also going to be doing a lot more post-processing videos in the future here for our dedicated Astro course, but we're going to get more and more advanced in the coming weeks and months. And if you want to help support this channel and continue seeing videos here in the dedicated Astro course, you can always head over to Patreon and sign up there for $5 or $10 a month, and you'll see a link for that at the end of this video. That's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.